Next on the agenda, Alec. Thank you so much for being patient. Alec will be presenting on a request for BOG support of the Diversity Committee Statement of Solidarity. Joy, are you joining Alec? Yes. Welcome. Thank you. Please, either Alec or Joy, whoever's going to lead off, and then one other. Who's our? You got to remind me of your name again. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Mary Cypers with the Anti-Defamation
Mary,
League.
thank you for being here again. Yes. All right. Whoever is going to begin to present, we would appreciate it. Reference page 44, I think, Alec, in the BOG materials.
Correct. So you have. Okay. So you have before you the statement that the Diversity Committee would like to issue in solidarity with specialty bar members in the state of Oregon. What I wanted to do was to set the table because there are times we talk about issues like this and we might say, well, this is a social issue, or this is a political issue, or this is about contrasting speech. And I want to set the table regarding the reality of what's going on in both the state of Washington and the state of Oregon, where the responses to the speech, to the writings by the specialty bar, led to physical threats, intimidation, and harassment. Not a counter speech, a counter argument. And so I've asked Mary Cyphers, who is the regional director of the Anti-Defamation League, to come because the ADL monitors this activity. And I don't know if you all recall, but I think just during I don't know if it was the holiday season, an African-American disc jockey who didn't put on the right music for, I'm going to use a shorthand term, skinheads, found himself being attacked physically and beaten because he didn't move fast enough. I don't know if you know that during the holiday season, I believe there was leafleting going on in West Seattle, but targeting communities, basically saying, we are here. So Mary, if you could share with the members that reality.
Of course. Thank you to the Board of Governors of the Washington State Bar Association for having me here today. As Alex said, my name is Mary Cypers, and I'm the Regional Director for the Anti-Defamation League's Pacific Northwest office. As you might know, the ADL is an over 100-year-old organization whose mission is to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure fair and just treatment to all. Our founders envisioned in America where those who were seemed different were not targets of discrimination and threats, but were equals worthy of shared opportunity. And for over a century, ADL has taken a holistic approach to fighting bigotry. That includes exposing extremist groups, training law enforcement and community leaders on hate crimes, passing civil rights legislation, and training our youngest to address bias from a young age. Unfortunately, in today's climate, our long-standing efforts are more vital than perhaps ever before. In the Pacific Northwest, we are seeing a sharp rise in white supremacist activity and a surge in hate incidents and hate crimes. I'm going to break down both trends that we're seeing, both anecdotally and from the data that we see in our community. As you undoubtedly know, since 2016, we have seen a rise in white supremacist activity throughout the country and here in the Pacific Northwest. The events in Charlottesville, Virginia sparked a wave of white supremacist groups that formed and describe themselves as the alternative right. While the alt-right seeks to appear more moderate than traditional white supremacists, we at ADL believe that they still espouse a form of white supremacy that they attempt to sugarcoat. And here in the Pacific Northwest, we have seen white supremacist groups become more active and emboldened than ever before since 2016 and embrace a number of new tactics in our community. Two specific ones that we're seeing that are quite active and have been very active over the past year are Patriot Front and Identity Europa. There are two groups that are most active in our area here in the Puget Sound who espouse an ideology of promoting white American culture and European identity, but their real aim is to create an American society with only white people, and they ascribe to anti-Semitic, racist, and anti-immigrant beliefs. And prior to 2016, white supremacists had a long history in the Pacific Northwest, but we weren't really seeing their activity as out in the public as we are now, and they were mostly operating in the shadows and on the dark web. But we're seeing today is groups like these two that I just mentioned spread their propaganda materials widely on college campuses all over Washington state. They're publicly posting images and bragging about this sort of propaganda spreading on social media. They're hanging up large banners with their slogans and messages in large visible public areas on highway overpasses and in communities. And finally, one very new tactic that we would have never seen before is that they're actually coming into neighborhoods and distributing anti-left and anti-immigrant propaganda near schools and on people's property. Just 2 weeks ago, we worked closely with law enforcement when Patriot Front dropped hundreds of flyers in neighborhoods and on homes in at least 8 cities in the Puget Sound, including in West Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue, Kirkland, and Redmond, just to name a few. These groups are more emboldened than ever before, increasing their propaganda distribution and targeting homes and neighborhoods, making people feel unsafe. According to a 2017 ADL report that our Center on Extremism put together, white supremacists targeted Oregon with the highest number of white supremacist banners in public places. And another ADL report that we issued last year showed that white supremacist propaganda on college campuses in Washington state more than tripled from the previous year, and is the 5th state where we're receiving the most propaganda of any state in the entire country. This climate of divisiveness and prejudice is really bleeding over and creating an atmosphere in which hate crimes and hate incidents are steeply increasing, and the data really bears that. In November 2018, just recently, the FBI released their annual report showing that hate crimes increased by 17% nationwide in 2017 over the previous year. And when you break down those numbers, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing a 23% increase in religious-based hate crimes, with 60% of these crimes targeting the Jewish community. We're seeing an 18% increase in race-based hate crimes, accounting for 58% of all hate crimes. Crimes against the African American community were the plurality of these and accounted for 28% of all reported hate crimes. We're also seeing a 24% increase in hate crimes against Latinos. There was also a significant increase in the number of hate crimes directed at Arab Americans, Asian Pacific Americans, and Native Americans. And finally, we saw a 5% increase in crimes directed towards the LGBTQ community. At ADL, we also do an audit of anti-Semitic incidents where we collect information from the community that might not always make it into the FBI data because a lot of these are incidents and not crimes. This includes vandalism, assault, and harassment. And last year, we saw a 57% increase in anti-Semitic incidents nationwide. And more startling, I think, is this trend that we saw a 94% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in K-12 schools in last year's audit. Judging by the numbers of calls and contacts we're receiving from the Pacific Northwest community, we can only imagine what these numbers will detail in the future, and we know that this is prevalent and ongoing right here in our backyard. While these statistics are very grim, we do think that increased reporting is positive, showing increased trust building with law enforcement in the community. But we're also seeing people from all backgrounds and walks of life resolute in the face of bigotry and asking how they can step up to make a change. So we thank you so much for examining this matter and for your dedication to creating a more inclusive community. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Alec,
Any questions for Mary?
you want to pause there? Okay. Questions? Governors? We have one from Rajiv. Go ahead, Rajiv.
It's more of a statement. I think the Diversity Committee and everyone involved in crafting the statement has done an amazing job. It's been revised a number of times. I think it's addressed any concerns we have. It very specifically is not about the content of the speech. It's about being able to make speech without threats of harm and retaliation. I fully endorse this letter. I hope the BOG gives its permission so that this letter can be advanced. I hope you've all taken the time to read it because it has a powerful and important message. And I want to thank the three of you for being here to present this important matter to the Board of Governors. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rajiv. Any other questions or comments, Governor?
Then I'll proceed.
Alec, please.
Governor's my first job after passing the bar was as regional attorney for the Civil Rights Commission for the Northwest region. And one of my first assignments was studying bigotry and violence in Idaho. And as I studied that issue, one of the things I found was there was, first of all, a Jewish restaurateur outside of Coeur d'Alene who one morning came to his place of business, and there were swastikas on his place of business, and there was Jew and kike on his place of business. There were very few Jewish people in that area. And so the isolation he felt and the fear he felt was palpable. I then interviewed a woman who had an adoption agency where a number of the children she was placing were children of color. They were multiracial. And a man approached her and those children in a restaurant and proceeded to talk about the mongrels and proceeded to verbally attack her, but also make her aware that he knew where they were, he knew what they were about, and he was going to stop them. I interviewed another woman who was German born, but at one time had been married to an African American. So she had her German born son and her two mixed race children. And there was a man who proceeded to terrorize them for well over a year, attacking especially the German, the oldest son, German born, as a race traitor. Early on, a lot of those incidents were just considered pranks, isolated, not really to be worried about, not really to be concerned about. And then the Aryan Nations Church became more visible. And every summer there was a national conclave, an international conclave of hate groups in that area. And some of the members and adherents on the farther right side, if they could be considered that, then began to also act out violently. And they were emboldened because people did nothing for a while. I interviewed law enforcement officials. Luckily, there was a undersheriff in Coeur d'Alene who really saw the danger. But the police chief in Boise didn't see that problem until some of the Aryans were brought up for charges, and they then discovered a bomb that had been placed at the Boise Police Department, similar to a bomb that had been placed at the, I think it was a Jewish stake it was called, but it's not a temple, but it's a community building. When the specialty bars spoke as strongly as they did, I had to think about what was really kind of going on with not just the response that says, well, I'm not going to pay my dues and you've got to cut this off, but what was going on within the personal attacks, the personal harassment, the personal intimidation, the personal threats of violence. And actually what was going on was staring me right in the face. How dare these people speak out forcefully against a white man? How dare they? Not only need they be challenged with what they said, they need to be stopped by any means necessary. And that emboldenment happens when we do nothing. They won't stop. They are indicating that they will do more. And the signs are already here. So in the 1980s, you might recall, there were economic turmoil. And during that turmoil, a number of people were very upset and looked at the other as their problem. And this is fertile ground for hate groups. You may recall that at one time, the Klan decided to do their patrols in, I believe it was Galveston Harbor, attacking Vietnamese fishermen. Because there was such already an opposition to what was going on that they saw this is their time to now become vigilante enforcers. So it is certainly one thing for me or any of you to have a very strong opinion, and for others of you to come back with your very strong opinion. But it is another thing entirely when other actions and tactics are being used to not just oppose my opinion, but to shut me down, and to shut me down with threats of, we're going to go after your license, we're going to go after you. So, governors, I'm asking for you to pass this, because actually this is not only a statement in solidarity, it is a statement of warning to our members that this is going on, and that we have to pull ranks around us in terms of those of us who uphold the idea of adherence to the law and mutual respect. Those specialty bar members, some of them ended up resigning from their position. Because especially in Oregon, outside of Portland, there's a lot of isolation. I had the experience of being in Coeur d'Alene, and at one point realizing a flash of fear, because I knew who was in the area, and I was the only black face on that street. And during that study, I began to wonder, wait a minute, I don't know who any of you are, but you know who I am. I don't think that was an unfounded fear. That was real. And so I ask you to pass this. There may be people who will say, well, if you do this, we're going to sue you. Well, the question really becomes, do we wait so we give in to the fear and not call out egregious examples like these for what they are and say, we will not tolerate it, we will not support it, we will call you out? Or do we wait until things get worse?
Thanks, Alec. Gene.
Just to let you know, I've already signed off on the letter for being on the board of ELBA. Putting that aside, I wholeheartedly, completely support this letter and the sentiment and everything you shared with us, and I urge the Board of Governors to agree and pass the motion.
Thanks, Gene. Other questions? Kyle?
So I've had the privilege of being a member of the Washington State Bar since 1996, as well as the Oregon State Bar since 1996. And I witnessed the April Bar Journal where this unfolded and the aftermath and the controversy. And the controversy and the litigation in Oregon involved mostly the references to the Trump administration and how some folks felt about our president and actions and maybe his thinking on issues. I see this differently. I see this as supporting the minority bar organizations in resisting retaliation and punishing people for thoughts, not having anything to do with the Trump administration or people who might favor President Trump or might not. It's addressed specifically to retaliation and actions against these minority bar associations and its membership on the basis of belief and their positions. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But it's different from we have strong opinions and we have at it, in writing or verbally, and then going just one other step to make it very personal and very targeted, saying we will hurt you. I will hurt you for taking the position you take.
Thank you.
Paul, you have your hand up?
I move to approve the statement of solidarity.
Okay, there's a motion to approve. Seconded, motion by Paul, seconded by PJ. Any further discussion? We have a hand in the audience. Governors, any further discussion? We're going to see none. Julie. Yes, I apologize. One moment, Jim.
Sorry. And this won't surprise Governor Stevens. This was on for first read, and I had hoped to make some comments in the executive session, and I have not been able to do that. So I'm not sure how to provide those comments at this point if you're going to vote on it now when it's on for first read.
Paul?
I guess I'll go back to, I think, what Governor Schicchetti was perhaps alluding to, that there is risk of litigation. There is risk that this will be perceived as political speech and could trigger additional angst under, the recent Janus Supreme Court decision. But I think those concerns have been addressed, taking out political references, hopefully. And I think that it's a risk worth taking because I think it's an important position.
Thanks, Paul. Jim?
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little confused as far as what you're actually, I didn't see something in writing, I just went through it again, that the board is voting on other than saying that the diversity committee, that the vote is, we're going to allow the diversity committee to send this out. And yet, in 2017, the Bar Association itself sent out its own statement. And I'm a little interested in whether there will be any kind of accompanying verbiage instead of just saying, oh, thank you for sending this. You are okay to send this out. Why are we not taking on this as a group? Is it because there is concern? And I do agree with any comments that say that should be a civil rights and a humanistic approach here rather than a political approach. I do believe that that's where things get into trouble. And to the extent that politics in any sort or any way that can be suggested is taken out of it, I think that's a good idea. But I don't understand why the bar 2 years ago submitted its own statement similar, and now, although I appreciate the diversity groups that have joined together here, and I think they should be the point of the spear, literally, why we're not more supportive with our own statement, even a little paragraph that restates, this is what we did, and here's a group of our attorneys that are taking these steps. I'm confused about what's being voted on.
Thanks, Jim. Question before the board. Who wants to take a shot at answering that? Anyone? Alec.
This was the committee that developed this, and that's why we reference the 2017 statement by the Board of Governors. So it's really just where the origin was, and I would imagine that the other things that we will do, but we weren't the drafters, the committee was.
Okay, thanks, Alec. We've got Ethan and then Paul.
I just have a point of clarification, and before that, just thank you for this excellent presentation and the work of the Diversity Committee. My question for Alec is, did you intend for this to be voted on today or just read in light of the comment from the General Counsel that she wanted to weigh in on this?
I'm fine with voting on it today myself.
Okay. Paul?
Going to Mr. McPherson's point, I think, and Governor Stevens has said, I think that the committee wants to be taking the lead on this, but I think part of what we're approving in voting on this is also the use of the WSBA's email systems and mailing systems for the purposes of this. So I think it is at least impliedly being sent out by the WSBA and approved by the Board of Governors.
Governors and Ethan.
Is it possible to enter an executive session at the end of the meeting today to hear from the General Counsel?
That's the plan, is we're going to have an executive session at the end. And if this is one of the items the governors want to take up, that's one of the items we can take up. Jim?
Over the years, there's been discussion about what's the purpose of a first reading, if things are going to be voted on a first reading, and I know that many times things are exigent, and maybe that could be the purpose here because it's a volatile issue. But I do want to remind the board that it's not a good policy to make it a habit to take things on first read and then vote on them, because those of us that follow the board who possibly can't make it to a first reading but realize they can give input later might make decisions. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen in this particular case, but I appreciate the comments of your counsel about the process.
Thanks, Jim. Anyone else before we vote on the motion? Scanning the room, I see no addition. Yes, Chris.
I guess in light of that, I would move to table until March, until we've had a chance to hear from our General Counsel. I am absolutely in favor of the Diversity Committee issuing this statement. I don't have any difficulty with the board giving them that authorization, but I think it is on just for first reading, and I want to make sure that we are careful in our processes and ensure that we don't take action on items unless absolutely necessary when they're not scheduled for action. So my motion is to table until March.
All right, we have a motion to table to a definite period of time, the March meeting. We have that motion by Chris Meserve, a second by Carla Higginson. Any debate on that motion? Alec.
Just an observation, and that is as we're all human, since this is my ox, I would ordinarily say, oh, no, but I get it, and it's okay to hold it over. I have an interest. I don't know that there's a conflict.
Okay, any other comment?
It's-
Yes, Paul.
Given that Alec and I have exchanged some knowing glances, he seems okay with delaying until March. I'm happy to withdraw my motion if that facilitates things.
Doesn't matter, okay. So let's vote on Chris's motion to table till March. I want to say this before we do that, Alec, and to everybody sitting at that table, to the diversity committees that have worked on this, I do not have a vote. I would, however, be inclined to jump right in the middle of this and join in solidarity and issue that statement wholeheartedly and unabashedly, and move forward with passion and vigor and make damn sure that the voice is heard and heard loud on this. Because I too, Alec, believe that silence is complicity, and silence allows people to continue to engage in behavior that is absolutely unacceptable. So if I've overstepped my bounds as the chair, so be it. But I want to say that, and I do support you wholeheartedly. So with that said, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of Chris's motion to table to a definite period of time, that is the March meeting, raise your hands, please. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 10 in favor. All those opposed? We have 1. Any abstentions? We have 1. Do you want it recorded? Record Alec's abstention, please. Motion to table until March passes. Thank you very much for your presentations. Appreciate it.